Welcome to the Athlete Lab podcast, where we are obsessed with athlete development and we try to find all the things that really move the needle forward. And today we are very lucky to be joined by Kevin Woodley. Kevin is a contributing writer for the NHL.com, covering the Vancouver Canucks, host of the InGoal Magazine podcast, and a contributing writer on that website as well. He's been around the game for a long, long time. I've had the great opportunity to talk to him a handful of times about our both of our passion, the position of goaltending. So, Kevin, thanks a lot for joining us.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Phil.
So we're coming off of the Olympics, which to me, watching as a fan, it was everything we could have hoped for, both on the men's and women's side. It was great hockey, right down to the golden goals for, to end it, which was awesome. But I'm really curious. I know you got some time off from the Canucks not playing, but I want to get your take on the Olympics and kind of what you saw from the goalies.
Well, it's a good thing the hockey was compelling because I went to see my daughter who's playing her first year at Division II volleyball, and it was actually a couple time zones further west for me. So some of those games were on at 3 in the morning. So getting up for them was a little tough, but I did because, like you said, it was so compelling. Um, the thing that stands out to me was just the pace, especially early on. I think I covered the 2010 games here in Vancouver. I was working for the Associated Press at the time, and I remember the difference for the Olympics when you're covering it is you're in the stands. Like they set up the press box sort of for here in Vancouver, it was like center ice, 8 rows up. It's like the best seats I've ever had, because the upper area where we normally sit in the press box, the sort of bird's eye view, is used, or at least in the 2010 games, was used for sort of the IOC family, like the delegates, and it's more secure and things like that. And um, it served as a reminder, and I think the Olympics are part of this. Like the pace was unbelievable, and how little space was out there, how much time and space was gone, how fast they were, how big they were. And it kind of, for me, became a reminder to at least once or twice a year as a journalist, go watch a game from ice level because it looks so easy from up in the press box looking straight down on it. You can see the plays develop. You can see where they should be going. Like the game just looks easy up there. And so I was taken aback at the pace and how little room there was and how fast everything was, and just, how incredible best on best is and how much we missed it. So it was enjoyable. I loved it. There were a lot of great stories. Obviously, as a Canadian, the finish didn't necessarily compute for me. But what an outstanding performance. We talk about athlete development. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck's a guy who, does not fit into a lot of our normal boxes, especially in the goaltending world of what it's supposed to look like. And he's the reason that, the American men came home with a gold medal. I think the biggest reason, at least in that gold medal game. And there's a guy that does things differently. There's a guy that never stops learning. There's a guy who did things differently through high school, who had to take charge of his own development because nobody else had identified him and sort of, picked him as a guy who was bound for great things and put them in their own program. So he had to develop his own. Like there's a guy who, in his year going into junior out of high school, would go to stick and puck and skate either on his own or drag buddies out and have like the rink be like, hey, like stick and puck, no goalies, like, not supposed to, like he had to take charge of his own development. So there's lessons there from an athlete development mindset, that, if you're not identified early, if you're not funneled into other people's, programs or what it should look like, you got to take charge of your own. And he's not the only guy that is in the NHL now that has talked to us about going to public skate and working on their crease movements, like just staking out a section of a public skate rink in goalie pads and doing crease movement. But when you've got the guy who's the best in the world at his craft, three Vezinas, one Hart, now a gold medal, in his, high school graduation year, doing that to further himself and ultimately leads to an NAHL job or gig that leads to college, that leads to all this. Like there's a great lesson there.
It really is, and that's touched on so much. First of all, the speed of the game. I want to quick share an experience during COVID when I was scouting the NHL. You go to these NHL games. There's no fans. So they would put you in Colorado specifically. They put the same things like 10 rows up in a quiet rink. I mean, remember watching McKinnon skate. And I was like, holy crap. Like it felt different watching him skate from that, and the speed of it that's a really good observation of those Olympics for sure. And then getting over to like Hellebuyck, what a great lesson. And I love all the, and he's from Michigan where I'm from. So he's getting all kinds of different, here in the local media. I know it's global media that's is really covering how well he played, but those lessons that he was playing high school hockey. And I didn't know that he was going to sticks and puck like that. That's great. And that's so good for kids to hear, because there's 17-year-olds like Gavin McKinnon, whoever, is a household name playing Division I hockey or playing all these kids playing in the CHL. And then, the next Connor Hellebuyck very well could be, at sticks and pucks somewhere in Western Canada or, the Southern US right now that hasn't been identified. So that really it's really good to know. And you mentioned something about him, and I'm curious, that he's always a learner. So you get this opportunity to be in NHL locker rooms with the Canucks and visiting teams. You're talking to all of them. Like, what does that mean to you when you see that, and how do you notice that in the short times and snippets you get with these guys?
I mean, it manifests itself differently with different guys. I think Connor is a great example of it. We've run so many articles over the years about so many different evolutions and developments in his game, and I do think, as much as he has a foundation and his foundation is unique and he believes deeply in it and he works hard on it with Wade Flaherty, they've got a great synergy there. Whole goalie department, right? Like, I love that about the Winnipeg Jets. It's not just Wade Flaherty and Connor Hellebuyck. It's Laurent Brossoit when he was there. It's Eric Comrie when he's there. Like, they have conversations regularly when they're reviewing video. They tend to do it together as a group of three. So you're learning off each other. And it's sort of that, to me, the constant learners are the ones that have great careers. Now, being a curious mind and always looking for new things does not mean you make the NHL, but I don't think it's a coincidence that so many of the guys that do have that. I mean, I'll just pull away from Hellebuyck for a minute. I look at Marc-Andre Fleury and the career he had. And there are so many different lessons. The way he embraces fun. Talking to Philip Gustafson recently about how his success in Minnesota can be traced back to Fleury sort of helping him rediscover the joy in just playing. As much as you're working on your game and you're a pro, if you lose that and it becomes just a job, it's hard to sort of thrive in the day-to-day and want to find new things. But Flower's a guy who already had 3 cups. He arrives, I'll give you the example, like, he was constantly evolving. He arrives in Chicago, between the cups, between the first and the last 2, totally changed the way he played on the post, with a new goalie coach, Mike Bale, sort of introducing the idea of a reverse VH to him, something he didn't use in his game, which gave him an anchor, gave him a base, gave him a place to go back to when plays got wild, because when he didn't feel good in the past, he would get super aggressive. And so when you get super aggressive, especially in today's game, you don't have that home base, that positional anchor, you can get chasing. And that's where there were times when he struggled where pucks were getting banked in off his butt from below the goal line because he wasn't returning to his post as a foundational point. Well, how do we fix that? We teach it. We have to have a goalie who's already got a cup, who's willing to learn it, to willing to adapt, to willing to add reverse VH. And so he does that. He wins 2 more. He goes to Vegas. He goes to Chicago. He gets to Chicago and he watches Kevin Lankinen. Now, Marc-Andre Fleury's had an incredible career. Kevin Lankinen, I think at that point, hadn't even won his world championship gold for Finland. Like, he was a young up-and-coming goaltender. Fleury sees him using an overlap on the post. So, I know there's not just goalies on this listening to this, but think of an overlap as just sort of basically squared up butterfly, but you're playing outside your post so that when you drop to the ice, your skate doesn't hit your post and push you away from it. You're basically taking a little more ice and taking your bottom leg and placing it below the goal line outside the post and just squaring up. And, Flower saw Lankinen have success with it. And so he went to school and he talked to him about it and he learned it and he added it to his game. Was it the only thing he did? No, but it was another tool in the toolbox, which is a phrase we hear a lot from these guys. And he added it and he continued to use it and have success. And he did things differently than a lot of guys. He would stand up on the post. But the point is, much like Hellebuyck, having that curious mind, having that willingness to consistently grow, you have to identify your foundation, but be willing to try new things. And whether it's Luongo adding the reverse VH late in his career, the guys that have long careers are constantly evolving in a position in a game that is constantly evolving around them. And that is almost universal. Like, if you shut yourself off to evolution and change in this position, like within 5 years, you're behind, like you're falling behind. And so to have that curious mind at an early age, I'll pull it back to Hellebuyck now. There's a great story from his dad that I fully credit. I heard it first told on a radio show in Winnipeg and then confirmed it. And we ran a story with it when he was a young kid going into the hockey store and going over to the player's stick rack. And I'd have to pull the story up to remember the age, but I'm thinking it's like grade 7, 8 kind of thing. And his dad was surprised he was over in the player sticks and asked him why. And he's like, well, if I can figure out, these curves on the player sticks and identify who has which one, like see this one, like the toe curve, little, like, I don't even know player terminology. I'm too much of a goalie geek, but like, the little elevated toe curve. He's like, this one's going to rise in this way. This one's going to come off the stick blade this way. If I can learn this as a goalie, I have an advantage. Now, flash forward again to Olympic champion. And one of the things that Connor Hellebuyck does better than anyone in the game, I would argue, and I've had some people help me with this argument because we've made it, probably better than anyone since Hasek, is read plays and anticipate. Over at InGoal, we do something called pro reads where we sit down and we watch video with NHL goalies and they sort of tell us what information they're looking for to base their decision making on, their positioning, their post play, their save execution. And I've done video with Hellebuyck where the puck comes over the blue line, guy's not even at the top of the circle on a 2-on-1, and he's not only telling you, like most guys at that point, it's like looking for cues and clues as to whether he's passing or shooting. And depending on the handedness and nature of the pass option, do they have to come across on their feet? Do they have to slide? Things like that. By the time it hits the top of the circle, Hellebuck's not only telling me whether he's passing or shooting, but he's telling me exactly where he's shooting too. High glove, low glove, low. Like this guy's ability to process the game. We used to say that Hasek had a brain like a computer and a body like a slinky. Hellebuyck doesn't use his body in the same way, but he has the same brain. And that, going right back to grade school, trying to learn the stick plays, to the way he studies video now, again, he's a learner. He is an active learner. He's always looking for new things. He started his career coming out of college, as much as there was an upward arc, needing to make changes. He didn't have a reverse VH in his game, didn't know how to play the post that way, held his gloves really low, all things he had to change. I was in Kelowna the summer where he first got introduced to Adam Francilia, who's sort of a biomechanics goalie trainer / coach. And I watched that was the year he broke out the next year. Like I watched him transform his game again, had success, had an NHL contract, was on the verge of breaking through and decided, hey, this is something that I think I can learn from, I can get better from, I can change. And actually, I think it's a massive staple in his game today. So, watching hockey, trying to, learn from video, there's so many different ways to be an active learner. But at the end of the day, the best are. That's what I found.
There's so many good points to that. And the stick study, and I had never heard that. And all the goalie development stuff I'd been around, like that's not something that was ever on my radar. Like that is really unique. And it's such a great message for any athletes listening. It's like, how are you trying? What advantage are you trying to get? And I remember that summer or the year after he had been out there with Adam, and like the difference in his game and his ability to stay square, and like it's cool. It's really good to know. I didn't know any of that stuff about Hellebuyck. That's really good, and just says a lot about him. Kind of circling back to you, like you're known as the goalie expert. I mean, as you know, I'm a huge fan of your podcast and all the things that you guys do and cover. I love the equipment portion, but how did this become your niche in the hockey world? Did you start off as a traditional writer and then found your way into being the goalie specialist, or how did that all evolve?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the kind words. My beer league team would disagree wholeheartedly. They laugh every time somebody makes a kind reference about my goalie knowledge. They're like, how come none of that applies on the ice, Kev? To which the answer ties in hand. I didn't grow up in the position. I didn't grow up in the game. I never played as a youth. I didn't actually start playing goal till I was 35. And my decision to play was based on starting on the journalism side. So Ian Clark, who I would put up there, as one of the, I don't know if we want to top 3, top 5, like one of the, godfathers of goalie coaching. was with his first of two stints with the Vancouver Canucks. I was covering the team for the Associated Press. I had a curious mind. I always felt like it was my job. I always felt like the job as a journalist was to be able to take the questions that my beer league buddies or that I would have had as a kid into the locker room to get the answers. That could be systems. Marcus Naslund was, one of the top players in the league, top scorers in the league at the time. And I wanted to know how. Like, I wanted to know how when he changed the way he was taping his stick, I used to annoy that poor Marcus. Like, why is this guy always asking me questions? But I was curious. Like, nowadays it's evolved. A lot of people want to know systems, and there's a little bit of guardedness about how much you're willing to give up when talking to journalists. But like, I think that desire is where it came from. And Ian sort of maybe recognized that. He was just launching Goalie News, which you may remember. I've got a few copies in frames on the walls. It was like a newsprint version of his old From the Crease magazine. And he asked me to be the editorial guy. Like, would you write feature stories on the goalies? I'm going to do the technical elements. I'll hire you to do layout, talk to the goalies and edit my technical teaching. And I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure nobody's produced as much written word on the evolution and the development of goaltending as Ian Clark. And so in those magazines, I was editing them. And the one thing about Ian's stuff is he's never been a coach that will tell a goalie, do it this way because I say so, right? Like, it was always, he always explained the why to the nth degree. Like, we could be talking about 2,000 words on angle over depth, right? Like, tough read. My job was to simplify it a little bit, but if you got through it, you knew, like, you understood the why. And that was my introduction to goaltending. So two things happened because of that. One, it changed my ability to have conversations with goalies around the NHL, because now I was speaking a language, and this is around 2003, 2004, which people can do math. I'm old now. And nobody was talking, like, there was nobody else doing that. Nobody was going into locker rooms and talking about post play, talking about save selection, talking about butterfly recovery mechanics. And I mean, it was a fascinating time to learn these things, because you had, guys who are in or were headed to, or in my opinion, should be, because the most famous example isn't in the Hall of Fame, but I think should be, in Curtis Joseph. But he stands out because I remember him, like, he is having all the success in the NHL, and he got up off the quote unquote wrong leg half the time in the butterfly. Like, he had a dominant leg that when he dropped to the ice in a butterfly, he always got up on his dominant leg. And as we know now, again, I know this is not a goalie only podcast. Think about it. If a goalie drops into his butterfly onto his knees and his next move is to his left, the fastest way to move left would be to lift your right leg and establish that skate edge and push your way across, either on your knees or up to your feet. It's efficiency. And if you want to move right, you start by, lifting your left knee off the ice to engage that edge and move across. Guys that had dominant legs, they always got up off the same leg. So if the puck went to the side, to the right, and they got up with the right leg, they had to get up with the right leg, then raise the left leg in order to be able to push to their right, which was a delay in efficiency. And this is, the tip of the iceberg to the way we break down the game biomechanically now. We had a whole generation of goalies that weren't doing it. So here I am learning about it, and 12 and 13-year-old kids are doing it, and guys in the NHL aren't, right? And you would have guys like Joseph being like, I went to a goalie school this summer, and I watch 13-year-olds move better than I do, right? And so, and there's that still happens, right? So that was my introduction to it. Ian opened up a whole new world of language. I was able to go in and have conversations with goalies that I would never have been able to. I was like everybody else in journalism at the time. It was good goal, bad goal, but no idea why, right? Like, oh, short side goal, that's the AHL side if you give one up on the short side, right? Like, just cliches like that, but no understanding of why. And so I wanted to know the why. Ian gave me the language to have the conversation to learn these things. I think my favorite anecdote to come out of that was Sergei Bobrovsky. Was he in Philly, or he'd just gotten traded to Columbus? It was one or the other. I honestly can't remember. And just heading into the room, talking to the PR guy, and the PR person, I think it was Columbus, because I remember who the PR person was, and he just said, hey, like, he's open to talk, but the language, like, the English isn't great. Like, you might not get anywhere. And 15 minutes later, we're both on our knees in the visiting locker room at Rogers Arena, and we're bridging the gap between language with A, terminology that goalies understood, and B, physically demonstrating things. And like, I remember other guys looking like what the heck's going on over there? Is this guy, this is writer on the like floor in our locker room in a butterfly demo, and Bob was so, like, it was so cool. And again, goalies have gotten a little more guarded, but I think building those relationships in languages that I was the only one speaking to them, not that I was the only one that knew them, tons of other people did, but nobody was applying it on my side of the fence, on the journalism side. And it opened up a massive, like a cool new world to me. And then of course with that is, you got to play. I'm like, I'm learning so much. I got to try the position. And I also happen to have, we'd had our first child, 2004, my oldest daughter, Madeline. And I did the sympathy pregnancy where I just ate everything that my wife ate, and usually finished off her plate. I think I was up 50 pounds. So I needed something else too. We'd moved to the burbs. I'd lost my regular weekly basketball game, and I'm like, I'm going to be a goalie now. So, and I learned quickly that all these things I was applying, physically, they were very demanding. So the 50 came off in a hurry, and I became a goalie, and it allowed me to take a lot of the things that I talk about with these guys and at a much more rudimentary level, try them out.
That's awesome. I didn't know that backstory. Like, for you to take the initiative to play the position, and frankly, for your wife to let you start playing goalie too with a newborn at home, leaving the 10 at night, I imagine that went over like a lead balloon. But
yeah,
like good for you. That's awesome. That's and to be able to feel it and then hear all these different things. And you're so right on Ian Clark. I mean, like what he produces and the detail at which he has, and now knowing that you were the editing it, it really explains it. And those curious goalies out there who take the time to read it, they're going to get better. And that's the same for any athlete, whatever you're trying to get better at. Like the coaches like Ian are the ones that, set a standard for the others. That's really cool. Well, definitely found that neat niche. And you mentioned your beer league. Do you guys just turn the live barn off just so no one gets any material on you if you're having a bad game?
Yeah, no, I'm honestly, I got 2 skates. I'm down to 2 skates a week now. I need a knee replacement, but my wife was very generous to let me go play. You're right, in the early years. Unfortunately, due to the nature of beer league and the beer league hero syndrome, I have been forced to retire, and I do 2 skates a week, but no beer league. So the bad news is I miss that group. I don't miss getting run over by guys that think it's Game 7 of the Cup final and they're scouts in the stands. I had multiple concussions from the same guy in 3 straight years, and it's like, okay, we're done. So I just play twice a week. But the good news about it not being, it's actually way above my head. Got a 2-time Cup winner out there on Friday afternoons, like so far above my head, but I love it. But there's no live barn because it's not a. So now that live barn is a thing, I'm quite grateful not to be allowed to play beer league. My wife said no more.
That's awesome. So a big part of this, our audience, we're trying to reach youth parents and coaches, youth sports parents that are going to, like, they're challenged with this, making sure their kids still love the sport. They got into it. And then the parents are, their role is support and then make sure their kids still love it. Like, knowing the goalie parent world, or just parents in general, what would be something that you would tell a family to focus on? If a youth goalie family is listening to this, what would you have them focus on, or what have you sort of taken away over all your experience that would be really like an opportunity for them to make a difference in their goalies' lives?
Well, 2 things. One, you're going to have to bring my business partner, the founder of InGoal Magazine, David Hutchison, on, because he's got a young goalie playing junior hockey, and he's lived it a little more than me. And we also have a parent segment on our podcast specifically towards this that he kills, he crushes. It's become one of our most popular things on both the website and on the podcast, because he does such a good job. He puts research into it. It's not just his firsthand experience. He really goes to the science behind some of the studies and things that lead to some of this advice. And I've applied a lot of it My kids didn't play goal, didn't play hockey, probably because it was around them all the time. But my youngest is playing, as I mentioned, she's playing Div 2 volleyball in Hawaii right now. And a lot of the lessons that I learned listening to him and through his experiences with his son going through junior hockey were applied to her. And I've given advice to friends whose kids become goalies. And a lot of it is around just trying not to get too caught. It's really easy to say and really hard to do, but not get too caught up in keeping up with the Joneses, by, making it year round. Yeah, you can do goalie training in the summer. It's probably a really good thing, but it doesn't need to be your whole summer, right? Like other sports, it almost feels cliched, but like there's so much science out there about the importance of physical literacy, and I can tie that into the conversations that I can't. So many of the goalies that make the NHL, like yeah, there's ones that they started at 7 and they knew and they only played goal. But so many other ones that didn't start. Like Mackenzie Blackwood, I think, was 13 when he switched to goaltending, and by 18 he's drafted in the NHL. And look at the career he's had. You talk to goalies that play like physical literacy. All comes Jeremy Swayman, right? Like he was a goalie throughout. But one of the things that really helped with his skating that we've had a story on this at InGoal was when he was at the University of Maine, he took a course on ballet, right? And his mom teaches bar ballet, and he again ankle, dorsiflexion, the ability to move. We look at the Russian goaltenders and all the success they're having in the National Hockey League. Talk to them about what their, I think they call it gymnasium, like their athletic high school, like sports specializing school programs had. Most of them had elements of dance. Like again, the ability to move and control your body to do other things, other sports, baseball, again, like it's really easy to listen to me say that. Oh, everybody says that. And it's true, but it's for a reason. Like cliches exist for a reason because it's true, right? And, I could come up with tons of examples of different goalies I've talked to over the years about the importance of that. Playing out, right? Like not just being a goalie. Like some of them love it and that's all they want to do. And I get it, but playing out longer. From Braden Holtby, who has a Stanley Cup and won a Vezina Trophy, talking about his dad who played in the Western Hockey League as a goalie, not letting him just be a goalie till he was 13 or 14, because A, he knew the importance of the ability to skate, and at the National Hockey League level now with how dynamic the game is, if you can't move, you can't play as a goalie. So A, skating, but B, go back to Hellebuyck and reading the stick blades. It's about identifying, as Mitch Korn says, goalie is not a game of shots, it's a game of patterns. And so identifying those patterns, well, what better way than to identify the patterns and learn them as a young athlete than to be the person out there doing them as a forward, as a defenseman, learning to move, learning to read and anticipate the game from the perspective of other positions. So, and I know some minor hockey makes it impossible. Like I had a parent, whose son is now playing at ASU, not on varsity, but I think it's called ACHA. But just like having time of his life, playing hockey in college, getting an education, played junior on the East Coast. When he was younger, our kids would have been in school together, so I'm just trying to remember what age it was, but like 12, might have even been like 13 age, might have been 12. He had the opportunity, and I'm sure a lot of parents can relate to this, there's rep hockey. There's like 4 different levels. There's I don't know the terminology because again, my kids didn't play minor, like AAA, AA, single A, but it's all rep hockey. And his kid's first year as a goalie, like he could have made the last rep team, or he could have gone to house. And he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, how many goalies are on the rep team if he makes the rep team?" And it was like the 4th rep team because it wasn't just 3. It wasn't AAA, AA, single A. There was like a 4th level of rep there. Maybe it was a 2nd single A team. Anyways, terminology. How many goalies are on the rep team? He's like, "Well, 2." I said, "What happens if he goes to house and the nights he's not in net?" He's because will he still be able to play a lot of goalie when he's in house? Yes. They weren't at an age where they were forcing them to rotate. I said, "Does he like playing out?" He's okay. Can he play out when he's not in goal on the house team? Yep. I said, it's a no-brainer. Like really at this point on the 4th rep team, is the difference that big between the house and the rep? Like, no offense, he's not on the AAA team, and my advice probably actually wouldn't have changed because of the reason for it. I'm like, do you want your kid to basically sit on the bench every second game, or do you want him to play every game and skate out on the days where he can't play goalie, right? Because on house team or on rep teams, even if most of them don't allow it, but even the ones that do, it'd be like, well, he's not a good enough skater to skate out. So sorry, he just sits on the bench for the whole game. I'm like, it was a no-brainer at that age. And he had a better experience. He enjoyed the hockey, and he eventually made his way up. So by the time he was on 15, 16, he was on the AAA team, playing at the highest level of rep. And like I said, went and played junior on the East Coast in Massachusetts, now playing ACHA hockey in while going to Arizona State and getting to travel and all the things that come with it, and just absolutely loves the game, is using it as part of, his ability to go get an education. Like, what could be better? Does it change if he plays rep that year and spends half the year on the bench? I don't know, but it didn't affect him negatively not to go to house at that age and play a bunch. And I just think there's so much pressure on parents to play at the highest level possible. And I love everything USA Hockey does to try and make it so you don't have to make those decisions at early ages by making it for you, so that, there aren't two goalies on every team. You're not sitting on the bench. I think the phrase that's used, that it's child abuse to make a kid at a certain age drive for 2 hours to a game and sit and watch. And I think others can learn from that, in those opportunities, in those moments. Like, just don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush for everything to be elite level, and don't feel like you have to chase it and keep up, especially if it's at the expense of the joy of your child and how much they enjoy it.
Yeah, that's I couldn't agree more with what the potential expense could be if they stop liking it. And, watching teams split periods with goalies that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, it's unreal to see. And I've seen it firsthand where, a kid gives up a couple goals in the first half of the first period, and he's teary-eyed on the bench, and goes out in the second period and plays the first half, doesn't give up a goal. Now, that same kid might not have got a shot in that second period, but he comes back to the bench and thinks he's Connor Hellebuyck, feels great about it. Where, his experience or her experience, who's ever, playing is much different when it's like that. And it's true. That's great advice. And playing out, you're right, the kids want to play. Like, that's why if if adults got out of the way, those 10-year-old kids would just play. And I bet like 3 or 4 of them would raise their hand to play goalie. I was happened to be out on the ice with Jason Botterill's daughter when she was about 6. And he came up to me and he said, "Don't let her go anywhere near being a goalie." And I was like, "Yeah, all right." We dragged the pads on the ice, and guess who the first one to raise her hand was? Who wants to be a goalie for the first 20 minutes? And Annika's hand goes right up, and Boss was sitting there shaking his head, but, he's put the pads on. And then after 10, 15 minutes, she's like, "I want to do something else," because she's 6, and that's like,
Yes.
Kids want to play. Yeah. So that's really good. It's great advice that you gave your friend. And to be playing ACHA hockey, like, that's an accomplishment. It's a really good level of hockey. It's a great way to go through college, to be part of it. So that's really cool. And ASU, that's not a bad spot either. So that's cool. You've been around the league so long. Video, I got 2 questions. This video and analytics. So the use of coaches in development using video, and you see the iPads on the bench, that sort of thing. And then also when you're covering it and talking about analytics, what have you seen? What do you think's like, is it muddy? Is it become, is it paralysis by analysis, or kind of what have you seen and how has it evolved, and what some good takeaways in that world?
Well, you can certainly get into paralysis by analysis for sure. And that's where, like, coaches need to use it as a valuable tool, right? There's a lot you can learn though. Like, I hate to use the phrase, and I hesitate to even, but like, you've heard it, Phil, like, like goalie school goalie, right? So you go to all these camps and you're not playing, you're not getting enough minutes, but you're doing reps and everything is in a structured environment. You're really good in that environment. But then the game starts and you're not reading it and anticipating. It's why we started pro reads over at InGoal. Like, it's exactly why we started pro reads. And pro reads is basically, not that little back pat here, but Pro reads is basically NHL goalies watching video with us and explaining their saves and all the decisions they make. And, I had one the other day with Freddie Anderson, and it's Alex Ovechkin. Well, little Johnny or little Susie at 11 years old doesn't have to worry about coming across the crease and Ovi winding up with 100-mile-an-hour 1T that, oh, by the way, curves. For those that didn't know, it actually does curve down and away on the blocker, around you like a curveball you duck away from on your glove if he gets it off that crazy toe hill. Okay, speaking of stick blades, they don't have to worry about that. But hearing an NHL goalie analyze, different decisions, what they're looking for, okay, not just for the opposition trying to score on them, but their own defensive system. Like, okay, so many of those decisions, like, do I slide across? Okay, is it a one-time option because he's right-handed, or a left-handed option? He's got to catch it across his body. That changes where I move to, changes how much time I have, whether I come across on my skates, whether I slide. Like, all these decisions that go into how you play the game, we share it that way so that they can start thinking about that. Because you do get to a certain level, as much as about just going and playing, you're going to get to a certain level where you might not play enough, but you need to continually get better at how you anticipate those situations. And video is a great tool for that. Whether it's your own video, where you can look at, a goal, or look at your saves. Like, a lot of goalie coaches talk about positive reinforcement, showing them saves and identifying the things that they did well. A lot of goalie coaches will tell you that's how they end every session, or sometimes that's all they do in a session. Get their goalies feeling good by showing them all the things they're doing well. And then sometimes if there's a trend you analyze, and maybe this is where the analytics come in for a coach, you identify a trend in the numbers, and then you see something in their game that's leading to them. It's like, we got to switch this. We got to change this. That's where video can help you maybe have a conversation where I think the best ones sort of identify it, let them see it, and then they come to an agreement on whether they need to fix it and how maybe they can go about fixing it, as opposed to just being like, this has to change. Now, certainly if you've got a trend that keeps happening and your goalie's getting killed on it and you're losing games because other teams have identified this and they're going to school on it and they're beating him on a regular basis, and you see something that needs to change, that conversation might get a little more terse or a little more one-sided if they're being stubborn. But the best, it's a conversation. I think this all depends on the age group. Like, at the younger ages, now parents might not want to hear this, so I apologize in advance. But one of the number one things that we hear from goalie coaches, kids don't watch enough hockey. Goalies don't watch enough hockey. And so this is not, do not go running to, well, I don't know how many kids are watching, but don't go running to your parents and say, Kevin Woodley said I need to have the game on till midnight tonight. But that's the truth. Like it's the phone generation, right? Scroll through and watch the highlights and the clips. But those patterns that we talked about, identifying the things that make Connor Hellebuyck so special, his ability to sort of process those patterns and constantly be ahead of it, like, those don't exist in that 20-second clip. The same video that a coach will review with a goalie on a goal, like, usually the mistakes 2 passes before the goal goes in, or a pass, like, usually you get behind to play because of something you did before the puck goes in. And if you're only seeing the end of those clips, you're not really learning to read or process the game. And so, it can be an active thing you do, watching video, your own or others, and really thinking through it. I don't know the story well. Hopefully I don't mistell it, but there's a story about Wayne Gretzky and his dad making him watch games and just have a pen in his hand and a piece of paper and sort of, tracing the puck as it went around the ice as he watched the game, and watching, like, and again, I may be paraphrasing incorrectly here, but something along those lines. And you learn to feel for the flow and the nature and the patterns that develop. And sometimes that can be watching video and conscious thought, and I hate to make it sound like homework, but you're actually studying it. That can be sessions with coaches. It could be a coach doing a session with an entire association, going through multiple clips and trends. It could be the kid going to InGoalMag.com and watching. We have 350 pro reads up. We have a half an hour with Connor Hellebuyck on the site breaking down video. There can be benefits. Even if how Hellebuyck plays it is different than you'll still learn to identify the pattern. So on the video side, I think that's where it has a benefit, to get us out of that goalie school mentality, to have us thinking about not just ourselves, but how the game is played and moves around us, and then internalizing it or watching our own video and saying, okay, so how do I react to that? I'm watching a ton of hockey and I'm seeing east-west plays like crazy at a pace we've never seen before. How do I keep up to that? Do I become a better skater? Okay, I can work on that. Do I need to back off my depth? Can I be heels out on the top of my crease and keep up to this much east-west movement? Maybe not. Maybe I need to come. Dustin Wolf is not 6 feet tall. Smallest goal in the NHL at 5'11". Watch him play. Almost never, outside of a one-on-one chance down the wing with no pass option, he's almost never outside of his crease. And it's not just north-south to the top of his crease. It's east-west. He stays within his post. He's always got a piece of his inside leg inside his post. He plays a contained game at 5'11". The stereotype is small goalies have to be aggressive. It's not true. And if you watch enough of him, you'll realize that. And other goalies have watched Dustin Wolf. UC Saros has told me that he watches Dustin Wolf and thinks that he's the best at this. So watching hockey, using video in that way, that's one thing. Analytics. Dude, I'm talking way too much here, Phil. But where do you want me to go on analytics? What do you want to know?
No, I love this. Is fascinating. Such good advice for these families too. Like the analytics, you see, goals saved above average or above expected. Sorry. Right. Trying to quantify, taking the save percentage and on steroids. What is this telling you? Do you think that has muddied the water? Is it because your point, you're watching hockey, the game's not scripted. It's not football, where it's like coach says go X, Y, and Z. Like things are happening. And,
yeah,
my previous role, I would struggle with it because I basically want the analytics to tell the story that I saw. Like this is what I see. And then you check in. And a lot of times it does, but not always. So I'm kind of curious your experience. You're talking to these coaches and goalies and other coaches and players about different metrics that are being used now. Like what's your take on it? Which ones do you rely on? And for our people who are avid in athlete development, but also we're all fans, on some level for sure, what ones would you look to kind of be that, the best, most reliable stat, or tells the best story, I should say?
Well, I think first of all, like challenging our preconceived notions is important, right? Like usually, you're right. Like usually it matches the eye test, right? Like if you've got a goalie who plays hyper aggressive, and those, we just talked about the east-west plays, but we call them slot line plays, or Clearsight Analytics calls them slot line plays. They used to call it Royal Road, Stephen Valiquette's company, and that's who I have access to. That's the analytics that I get. And it's proprietary and it's behind closed doors, and typically just NHL teams have it, so it's not public. But typically you're going to see a guy who paints outside the line, so to speak, who plays heels out on the crease, is going to have worse numbers on a slot line play because that's just too much space to cover off, right? So a lot of the times the eye test will match. When it doesn't, there's usually, you can usually learn something from it, right? So it's a valuable tool that way. It's valuable to find out hey, not just where are we giving up goals, where are we having success? How much of that is my goalie? How much of that is the system in front of them? Goaltending does not exist in a vacuum. It is a function of team play and predictability of environment. Those reads are a lot easier. Every team gives up chances, but if I know where that chance is coming from, because I know what we're not going to give up, and that guy that comes over carries the puck and circles at the top of pulls up at the top of the circle and looks for options, and I know that my defenseman's got A, B, and C, now I'm only worried about D and E, right? Predictability, there is no such thing as a fully predictable. If the game was totally predictable, we'd all have 1,000 save percentages, but there are different levels, and we can measure that. And that's where I think it does matter. It is important. I don't care how much hockey you watch. You cannot account for the differences in shot quality. You can have a feel for one team being better defensively than the other, but you can't quantify it on 30. Nobody watches enough hockey to accurately quantify it. Nobody. And so what analytics does, what goals saved above expected, and goals saved above expected and adjusted save percentage, which is kind of the save percentage equivalent of it. One's a rate stat, So I use adjusted save percentage, which is kind of comparing the expected save percentage to what they're actually accomplishing. Are they above or below? I use that as a rate stat because it's more apples to apples, whereas goal saved above expected is cumulative. So if you've got a guy who's seen 1,000 shots and one that's seen 200, no matter how good if the guy that's seen 200 is outperforming the guy that's seen 1,000, he's doing unbelievably. It's cumulative, right? It just adds up over time. So both are important because you can measure workload and things like that. But I like to, compare the smaller sample guys using adjusted save percentage. A lot of times we'll see analysts say, well, like the starter's got this save percentage, the backup's got that save percentage. That's apples to apples. It's the same team. It's the same defensive structure. Within a season, I've seen 20 to 30 point swings between the starter and the backup. Like in environment. Like you would literally have to add 30 points to the other guy to make it an apples to apples comparison. Because one guy's got an 870 expected and the other guy's at 900. I've seen that on the same team. So if you're seeing that on the same team, that type of a swing, that type of discrepancy, and that can be, hey, the backup's getting the second half of back-to-backs. Our defense is terrible on those nights. Hey, we're throwing this guy to the Wolves because we know we're not being, Colorado hasn't lost all season. It's December and we're not beating them tonight. So he's getting that one. Like, we need to quantify that. And even within the same team, you need to quantify that. And comparing guys across the league, like you can't. And this helps level the playing field. And it shows us information about how difficult the environment is. What do we hear about Carolina a lot? Just to pull an example, because they were just in town and I talked to Freddie Anderson, I talked to Brandon Bussey, and they, from a cumulative standpoint, their goalies are never going to have huge numbers because they don't see a ton of shots, right? From a expected save percentage, Freddie Anderson, Brandon Bussey, and now out for the year, Pyotr Kochetkov, have 3 of the 5 lowest expected save percentages in the league. So it's hard to be a goalie in Carolina twofold. One, lower expected save percentage means tougher defensive environment, and they have some of the lowest. And people will be like, oh, they're a great defensive team. What are you talking about? They only give up 15 shots. Yeah, but if 5 of them are high danger, like that's a way higher percentage. I'd rather be the team that gives up 30 shots and only 5 high danger than the one that gives up 15 and 5, because I've been sitting on my butt all night watching the guy at the other end stop bullets in his teeth, or actually even worse, watching the guy at the other end get warmed up for 60 minutes with easy shots, and the next thing I see, it's a 2-on-1 with no back pressure. Like that's. And so we can quantify those things. We can't quantify how difficult it is mentally to be the guy that doesn't see a shot for 5 minutes and then faces a 2-on-1. But I think inherently we know that's a little tougher. But we can start to quantify all these different things, and we can take it to the nth degree. I've got 34 different points of data for every shot measured in the NHL this year in Clearsight Analytics. And I'd have to pull it up, but I think there's like 40 different, like they got 4 different types of breakaways. They got 7 different types of screens. And so you can start to filter through and see where your guy's having success. And in the case of trades or free agency, a lot of teams, like there are a lot of guys in the NHL, like people in charge that don't necessarily understand goaltending that still think, hey, he's a good goalie there. He's always been a good goalie. He'll be a good goalie here. Well, he might be a good goalie there because you're the best defensive team in the NHL when it comes to giving up slot line plays. And so he's insulated on the one thing he struggles with. If you're the worst team on slot line plays, and that's an area he struggles with, he's not going to have success for your team. And I've had a lot of contracts get handed out July 1st, and I'm like, I don't think that's a fit. And it's a buyout 2 years later, and everyone's going, nobody could have seen it coming. I'm like, you could have if you just looked at the numbers. And they're not perfect, because that's the other thing that changes. Goalies can evolve for sure. But what changes more often? Coaching staff, and the defensive structure in front of them. So you could have something that works great when you sign the guy, but now you fire a coach, you change things, and all of a sudden you've gone from a zone to a man-on-man, and you're giving up the slot line that you weren't giving up before, and all of a sudden the goalie's not having success, and you're going, man, why isn't my goalie as good as he was last year? Well, you changed everything in front of him. So there's a lot to it.
Yeah, no, it's so well put, because all of those factors, are something, and getting going are like major contributors. And it's also the goalie who isn't very good in one system they can be a good goalie if they're built in a certain way. If they're going to play a certain way, they're going to have success. And I love Brandon Bussey, you mentioned, like he's another late developer. I remember, without USHL changed a rule that made overage American goalies not count as overagers, and that gave him like a berth in his career. Like he was an overager in Mesquite, and then ends up at Western, and then now, yeah, the rest is history. Now he's going to be in the league for a long time, and like, but would he be the way he plays? Is he going to have as much success somewhere else? Maybe, maybe not. But like what he's made of, and that's it. That's the thing with all forwards. I was talking to a retired NHL player not too long ago who decided on his college. It was between Michigan and Michigan State. Michigan State at the time played a defensive system. He wanted to score goals. He wanted to run, and frankly, he didn't want to have any defensive responsibility. That's where he went, and then the same that at that time, defensemen went to Michigan State and they ended up in the NHL because they played this very structured way. They played pro hockey at an amateur level. And guess what?
Right.
That translated pretty well. They had 5 of 6 guys from one team going on, and that's that environment. And that's you touched on it, like watching hockey. Like those are things that kids can learn from watching, because it is different. You can learn to play a certain way.
Well, and the other thing too, like I had a goalie coach reach out to me during the Olympic break. And I don't know if I don't want to use his name just because I want to give him credit, but I don't know if he wants credit publicly. So I'm a little nervous about this. So I'm not going to use his name, but then if he did want credit, I might be texting you later to throw it in there. But he said, like, man, it really just is about keep building your game. Like, just keep building. And you talked about late developers, quote unquote, late bloomers. We know Binnington and the story there. We've all heard that one, wins the cup with St. Louis. Brandon Bussey. When I look at the adjusted save percentage right now in the NHL, top 5 guys right now. I haven't checked in a couple of days. So last time I checked, things shift. There's a small sample guy in there who one tough night could shift things. But Ilya Sorokin, which probably won't surprise anyone. He probably should win the Vezina Trophy this year. He's been lights out. Sort of projected as a star for a long time. After that, the next 4, and I don't have them in order, but they are Brandon Bussey, who's 27 years old in his first year in the NHL. Small sample guy, Devin Cooley, who also took a long time to sort of establish himself in the NHL. Again, went to multiple different teams, different voices along the way. Sometimes something clicks. Sometimes it's the same message delivered differently. Sometimes it's a new message, a new technique, a new way of thinking about things. But the tools in the toolbox, you pick them up along the way. So Devin Cooley's in that list. Logan Thompson's in that list, a guy who went back to Canadian U Sport, started his pro hockey in the ECHL, worked his way up, and now he's a starter and a star on Team Canada. And the 5th one is a little more out there, not known, but again, late bloomer, spent the last 3 years in the American Hockey League, came over from Europe, signed a free agent contract as an unrestricted free agent after sort of coming out of nowhere. I think he was already 20 when he went to Sweden and developed. Nikita Tolopilo, 6'6" with the Vancouver Canucks. And again, most people aren't going to know that Nikita Tolopilo is playing that well because the defense here in Vancouver is a bit of a tire fire. And so you require those adjusted numbers to understand just how good he's been, because the raw numbers, Bussey the same way, right? Again, because of the low expected save percentage, I think his raw numbers are 906, which are great, but they don't jump off the page top 5 in the NHL. When you compare his environment to how he's performed, it's top 5 in the NHL. But I think it's interesting on an athlete development podcast that 4 of the 5 guys that I just gave you are all quote unquote late bloomers.
Right. Oh gosh. And they stuck with it. They just kept playing. Yeah.
Just keep building.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. They just keep building. It's interesting when you hear goalie coaches say something so simple, or coaches in general. Simple but very profound, and it's such a message that if you're talking to NHLers or Major League Baseball players, or you're talking to a 9-year-old, it's like, just keep building, get a little bit better, and that's a really good message from the highest level, and one of the toughest positions, is to find your way there, just because of limited spots and stuff, and it's interesting when you have those. So the analytics, they really are valuable, and it does tell another story. And I'm familiar with Valley's work there with ClearSight Analytics, and when he dives down into it, it tells you a lot of what that what the goalies are seeing, what's going on in the games. I remember there was a USHL team that used their analytics, and they were getting over the slot line. They wouldn't shoot the puck unless the puck went over the slot line. And that team had a lot of players who ended up playing in the NHL. The forward that's in playing for Calgary right now, went to Harvard. I'm losing his name, Matt Coronado, I believe. Like, he was, every time he could rip the puck, but he'd get it over the Royal Road every time with the slot line. I think at the time it was the Royal Road, but you watch them play, they had great information and they had great forward-thinking coaches, and they executed. So it's like studying the game at another level. It's really, really interesting. And the way that you put it, it's excellent. It really has helped the game evolve.
Yeah, and then now the challenge is what's the next thing, right? Because everybody knows that, come down and straight lines and attack the goalie and just try and rip one. Yeah, hey, if you tickle the bar, great, but like, it's not even a high danger chance if you're moving in straight lines. Make a pass to the guy on the other side of the ice and it becomes a 40% scoring play if he one times it on net, right? Like, I've talked to players, their understanding. Chris Kreider actually worked with Steven Valiquette before he became a 50 goal scorer, and he talks about it. He did a great thing with the Ducks after signing there about how he used to think that he had to catch that lateral pass. Like, okay, it's one thing to get the lateral pass, but his thought on the other side of it was catch it, dust it off, get your head up and pick a corner. Well, no, the biggest thing is to one time and get it off your blade before the goalie gets across and gets set. You don't have to, it's not about perfect placement. It's about getting it on and off and on the net. And so those understandings, I think from reverse engineering this from the goalie standpoint, we talk about constantly building, just get a little better, a little better. Like at the highest level, sometimes you have breakthroughs. Sometimes you, like you said, you'll have a different voice, a different technique or a different philosophy tactically, like in terms of where you play in the crease that will click and resonate and allow you to find confidence and build success and, to the moon from the minors to the top of the NHL. But a lot of the times it's 1 or 2%. And if we can find that in the numbers or in the technique or in the tactics, that 1 or 2% that they're chasing at the highest level of the game, like 1% is the difference between an 890 and a 900, which is American League or NHL. 1% is the difference between 900 backup and 910 starter. 1% is the difference between 910 starter and 920 winning event. Like that, those are all 1% jumps. And you add them all up and it's only 4%. So incremental improvements and analytics can help you find where you're missing and what the easy fixes are, but also just that continuous building mindset to look for the little things. Now, here's the challenge, goalies specifically, and I'm sure it probably applies to other things. You can get caught chasing change for the sake of change. And that's where that's where knowing your game and knowing who you are as a person and as a player in any sport matters, because you can lose your foundation if you start chasing change for the sake of change. And that's where video can help. I've had a lot of guys be like, man, like they go through runs where they don't feel they're playing well. Pucks are going in. We play a game on ice with a frozen odd-shaped object that bounces crazily. And so I've talked to NHL goalies to be like, man, I gave up like 5 goals for like 4 starts in a row. And like, I'm starting to think about, I need to change my positioning, my hands, this and that. And then the goalie coach calls them in and they go in goal by goal. And they're like, would you do anything differently? No, like I've really broken this down. I played this the right way and the puck just went in. And sometimes those decisions, sometimes those video sessions result in, oh yeah, I could have done this differently, but really it wasn't that. And so you realize that you got to be careful, open to new tools, open to new toolbox, but all, adding to your toolbox, but all along sort of understanding where to put your toolbox, like where the legs of it are, where the foundation of it is, and not straying too far from that as long as you're continuing to have some success. And it's, again, it's like everything in sports, goaltending in particular, it all exists on a sliding scale and you need to find that nice balance point. And I think that's what I love most about this position in particular. Everybody's balance point on all these different sliding scales of skills is different. Like there is no absolute in this position. There is no one way to play this game. The greatest of all time played it, doing barrel rolls across the crease in Dominik Hasek with a method to the madness, mind you, and we can get into that one day. But like it's, that's what I love most about this. The constant evolution, the ability to always find new things in new ways, but understanding that there's never going to be just one way that defines everything.
That's so well said, and makes it, and I'd say it's our game in general.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, there's no right way to score a goal. Just score. Or you talk to skating coaches, and there's different ways. But be fast and have balance and have good posture, and like you do those things. Maybe it doesn't necessarily. There isn't one right way, which makes our sport so special. One of the many reasons. So, I Kevin, where can our listeners find all the stuff you do so they want to keep following you?
For the most part, InGoalMag.com, InGoal Magazine. Me and David Hutchison, he's the founder. I came on as a partner, and we run that basically. Like if you're not a goalie, probably not for you. But if you are a goalie, if you got a young kid that's a goalie, it is a subscription site to get into the premium content, the videos with the NHL goalies. There's a cost for us to produce it, but it's literally like there's like 4 new articles a week. There's a new pro reads every week, and it's $50 Canadian a year, which is like I think the same as a like large vanilla latte in the States with the way the exchange rate's going right now for you guys. So yeah, that's where you find us the most. I still do I do NHL.com. I cover the Canucks. They're gracious enough to let me write a goalie column called Unmasked every 2 weeks where we dig into some of these elements. But for the most part, a lot of the stuff we talked about today is you'll find it the best at InGoalMag.com. And we have the InGoal Radio Podcast, runs weekly, talking to PWHL, NHL goalies, goalie coaches, goalies from Europe. Just trying to bring in as many voices, mindset, biomechanics experts. We're like you do here, Phil. We're trying to learn from as many different people, and that's free. You can find that anywhere, any podcast or podcatcher, podcast provider, or at ingoalmag.com. No charge on that one, and it's always loaded with great insights from people much smarter than myself.
Also, and as a subscriber, everybody who's interested in the sport should be subscribing, as what you do is excellent. I read all the things. I pointed NHL prospects, NHL goalies to certain articles depending on and pro reads. So you guys do an excellent job. So all of it, I would say that you're a coach and you want to learn to help teach your kids to score more goals. This was be curious. Be curious about what goalies are doing. And I think the goaltending position has been a little bit ahead of the curve over the years with equipment, which, sadly, I don't know, we won't have time to get into that, but like just what's going on in the position is a big part of our sport. So I would urge all coaches, anyone's interested to follow along. You do a really good job. So thank you very much for taking the time today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bill. Thanks for the kind words. And I would say too, the parent segment is like each podcast. The segment itself is behind a paywall if you just want to listen to the segment by itself, but it's included in each podcast. So if you're listening to the podcast, like I really can't praise the work that David Hutchison has done on that enough. It's become one of our most popular features because he doesn't just come on and preach as a parent. He brings his real world experience with a goalie who's been through lots of ups and downs in junior hockey, and he researches the science to sort of back it up. So it's been such a massive part of it. So if you're a parent of any athlete in any sport, it's a worthwhile listen. Like I said, it's usually about halfway through each episode before we do the feature interview. And if you're a subscriber, you can access it, just the short snippet itself, which is usually between 5 and 10 minutes. I just want to make sure I said that because he's done such an incredible job with it. I think it's such a big part of our growth at InGoal, but just such an important. At the end of the day, not every kid's going to want to read every article. And as a parent, you can learn so much through us to help them along the way. But the advice that Hutch gives, it's applied to me as my kid's not a goalie, but she's a libero, which I'm told is the goaltending of the volleyball team. And so I've applied many of those things to her career, and she's still playing. So it must be doing something right.
Yeah, she chose Hawaii too, so she nailed it. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah. She got her mom's brains in terms of where should I go to school, upstate Vermont or Hawaii. Yeah, that works for us as parents visiting too.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. Well, we'll link all in the show notes so you can check out Kevin's work in InGoal Radio Podcast. If you found this helpful, please share this episode with a goalie family, a coach, or an athlete trying to figure out the next step. So make sure you subscribe to the Athlete Lab Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and all Apple Podcasts so you don't miss future conversations on athlete development. So Kevin, once again, thanks, man. It's great to catch up. Really enjoy your work and look forward to our next chat.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Phil. Really appreciate you having me on as a guest.